Well, hello everybody. This is Trailer Trash Tim. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. How many of you enjoy cruising, going on a cruise ship? Nice little vacation. They're great. I've been on several. I really enjoyed my time on board the ships. The times that I went, I've been on Disney cruise lines when a couple of my kids were smaller. We took them on a Disney cruise. And I've been on a couple of other cruises as well. But we have a little problem with cruising these days. I don't see myself booking any trips on a cruise ship anytime soon, at least not on Carnival cruise lines. I've sailed with Carnival a couple of times, but I don't think that I'm going to be doing that anytime soon, particularly not on Carnival. Carnival is generally known as a party boat. Carnival is generally known as the budget class, if you will. If you're looking to take a cruise, uh, generally you're going to probably spend less money if you book with Carnival cruises. But we've had some incidences on, particularly on Carnival cruise lines recently, that I want to share with you. And perhaps it's because of the fact that they're one of the cheaper cruise lines. It's a lot easier to get a cruise for a good bit less money, apparently, on Carnival cruise lines. But I want to share a video with you right now of an incident that happened recently on a Carnival cruise line. And I just want you to give this a watch. I'm going to have to mute the sound because of language, but by playing the video, you'll get the gist of what's happening here. This is aboard a Carnival cruise ship. What happened here? This is, I believe, in a dining room aboard the ship, and a I don't know what you want to call it, if it's a fight that broke out or a melee or a Donnybrook, but here you see the behavior of the passengers aboard this Carnival. This as far I don't know exactly which Carnival ship this was. I know what a lot of people are calling it now. They're calling it the Ghetto of the Seas. And you can see that here in this dining room, people are throwing food, they're throwing chairs, they're throwing tables. It's just absolute carnage aboard a ship. And I want you to place yourself there. Imagine you were among the guests aboard this ship. Maybe it's you and your wife or your husband, and you're getting away for a little vacation for several nights on a cruise ship. Um, and this is what you're subjected to, or perhaps you're there with small children, and this breaks out aboard the ship while you're there. Let me show you one more. Okay, this next incident, I'm not sure if it was aboard the. Again, have you been on a cruise? I have, and it's been my experiences that it was nothing like this. There was a lot of revelry, a lot of people just having a good time, but they were, as far as I could tell, generally well behaved. Um, when you go on vacation and you go on a cruise ship, uh, you're just looking to relax. You're looking to have a good time, maybe take in some ports of call, perhaps some excursions. The last thing you want to encounter on a cruise ship, which is a contained, confined space, there's really nowhere to go except back to your cabin, I suppose. But you don't want to be subjected to this. Imagine you came to the dining room and you went to the buffet, perhaps, and you went and collected your meal and you started to head back to your table, and this happened while you're carrying your tray. I want you to imagine that for a moment. This is what has happened recently on these on these ships. Now, let me show you one more thing. Because of these incidences, there are people who have taken to referring to the Carnival Cruise Line as the ghetto of the seas. And I can understand that sentiment, but here's a young lady who's going to straighten us out. And here's what she has to say to us about calling Carnival Cruise Lines the ghetto of the seas. Now, if you couldn't catch what she was saying, might be a little hard. She was saying that if you're a person who refers to these ships as the ghetto of the seas, then you're a, guess what? Anybody? Any guesses out there? That's right, kids. You are a racist. Of course, everybody who disagrees with you is a racist. Just imagine again being on this ship with this sort of behavior breaking out aboard. What would you do? Now, I don't know what happens to these people who behave in such a manner. I have read that they are detained aboard the ship, and at the next port of call, they are taken off of the ship and left there with local authorities. That certainly would sound like a reasonable reaction to all this. I have read that that people that do this are banned for life from this particular cruise line, which is Carnival. It seems to be relegated to Carnival Cruise Lines. I don't have any reports of this of this happening aboard the other carriers, the Royal Caribbeans or the Disneys or what have you, the more upscale cruise lines. It seems to be relegated to this, if I may say, budget style of cruise line, which is Carnival. But again, I'm not going to be booking any Carnival cruises anytime soon. Now, this behavior, this mob-like behavior with these people completely unrestrained, undoubtedly alcohol is involved. They have no regard whatsoever for their fellow passengers. They come aboard this ship and somebody apparently says something about somebody's eyelashes or somebody's baby daddy or something like that, and they put everybody aboard the ship potentially in peril and in harm's way. This isn't right, and this has got to be hurting business for Carnival, and it should. But it's not relegated just to Carnival Cruise Lines. I'm going to link the article where I gleaned much of this down below this video so that you can read and watch a lot of other videos. I'm not going to post that many, just these couple or three, but you can see other examples of what I'm talking about, and it's not relegated just to Carnival Cruise Lines, although it is happening there. But this sort of behavior that you see, this mob-like behavior with no regard for the law or no regard for manners or decorum, just total chaos, just total animalistic activity. It's just unbelievable to me that this is happening. But this is also happening. I have videos which I'll link down below. This has happened at Disney World in Florida. It's happened at Disneyland in California, specifically in Fantasyland. This has happened at Busch Gardens in Florida. It happened on the opening day this year, 2024, at Six Flags Over Georgia. I was raised near Six Flags Over Georgia. I've been there many times. And this happened on opening day. As a matter of fact, I believe they had a fatality. I know that shots were fired at Six Flags Over Georgia. Suffice it to say, I've been to Six Flags for the last time. I have no interest, frankly, whether this happened or not. But this was, if there was a chance of me going to Six Flags Over Georgia, that's not going to happen anymore. I also have videos of this sort of behavior manifesting itself at these assorted pride parades in America. I want to show you one more video, so bear with me. In addition to the places I've named, the amusement parks, it's also happened at assorted American airports, such as Atlanta and Miami International Airport. And I want you to notice this. This incident occurred at Wicker Park in Chicago. And I want you to notice what happens here. Let's hit play. There was a time in the not too distant past when you would have never seen behavior like this in the United States. I don't know if this is happening around the world, but this is happening in the United States, and you have to stop and ask yourself why. Why is this happening? Why is there this complete breakdown of morality, this plague of lawlessness that is happening, particularly in the United States? Is it just people out having a good time? Or is it just a blatant disregard for all rules, all laws, all decorum? I think there are several reasons this is happening in the United States. And I believe the first reason, in no particular order, but the first reason that comes to mind for me is just an absolute breakdown, or just we are just completely lax, if you will, on crime. We simply pat people on the head instead of prosecuting them for behaving like this in public. It would be one thing if this sort of behavior was restrained among those who are breaking the law, but it is not. They are putting the lives of innocent people in peril, particularly in an enclosed environment such as a cruise ship where there's nowhere else to go. You imagine you save your money for a year and you book a cruise and you take your hard-earned money going to take a 4 or 5 night cruise. You're going to have a good time aboard this cruise ship. You're going to be able to frolic and revel and just have a good time. But this is what you run into. You think maybe you can get a refund? We're completely lax on crime and this sort of criminal behavior in America. Now, what if somebody came to your house or your yard and behaved like this and destroyed your property? What would you do? I know what some of the good old boys down in Alabama would do, but you know, people are not. There's no punishment when justice is administered largely that fits the crime, if you will. Maybe that's not always the case, but you know, if you break your neighbor's property, if you destroy your neighbor's property, ideally, you would be held accountable until such time as you could restore his property. You see this video of this young man jumping up and down on the roof of somebody's car. Of course, he doesn't care. It's not his car. He doesn't have any skin in the game. He's not making payments on it, or he didn't pay cash for it. So what does he care, right? Well, what if he were made by the force of law to repay the owner of the vehicle with either a replacement vehicle or the money to purchase a vehicle of the same value? But you see, what happens is the true victims in these crimes are just out. They're just SOL. When these people are apprehended and they do stand before a judge, it's not the rights of the victim that are restored. He might spend a little time behind bars and la-di-da, he's going to get out and he's probably going to return to the same sort of activity. We have in the United States, my friends, a particular subculture, and it is time that we talked about it, that we recognize it, that we identify it, and that we deal with it, because you can't allow this sort of behavior in any civilized nation. This is a subculture. You might call it a thug culture. We see it in urban centers across America. We see these areas in America that are crime infested, drug infested. They are not safe. You cannot walk down the streets of any major American city right now at nighttime. You can't walk down the streets of any major American city right now, a lot of them in the daytime, without feeling some threat to your safety and security. This should not be the case. Tucker Carlson recently did a video from Moscow where he walked freely in the city, and he was absolutely amazed at how things were in Moscow. law and order, people living peaceably with each other. I remember several years ago during the Clinton administration, there was a young man from America who was visiting the nation of Singapore. Some of you may remember that this young man, I believe his first name was Michael, I forget his last name, but he took a can of spray paint and he proceeded in Singapore City to redecorate a few cars in a parking lot in Singapore. He was caught. He stood before a judge. He was found guilty of his crimes of property damage, and he was sentenced to receive a punishment of caning. Caning. That's where that's where he is subjected to 3 lashes with a cane of some sort. Not very pleasant. And I also remember at that time that the Clinton administration was doing everything in their power to keep this from happening. But you know what? They failed, and it happened. And you know what else happened? That young man never redecorated any cars in Singapore City. Now, I've never been to Singapore. I've never been to Singapore City. I have a friend who is an international businessman who has done business in Singapore City, and he tells me firsthand it's wonderful. There's no crime. You can go anywhere. You can leave your car unlocked. Nobody's going to mess with you there because there is law and order. But we have become so effeminate in America toward things like this. We are so lax on crime that we just tolerate behavior like this thug behavior which emanates from these urban centers. What's another reason that this is happening? I believe that it is absolutely self-evident. There has been, particularly among, it must be said, although it's not restricted to the Black community, it is certainly the case that we have an absolute scarcity of fathers among young Black men in America. They simply have no fathers in the home. And there are so many of these mothers who have as many children as they can so that they can get a larger benefit check, more on their EBT card from the government. In other words, this sort of irresponsible, reckless, even immoral behavior is actually rewarded by the United States government. This should not be the case. This sort of criminal behavior, in my opinion, is a natural outgrowth of the lack of fathers, the lack of law and order, the lack of rules being upheld and followed in these urban centers, these places where it is another version of life in America in this subculture called the thug culture. Drive through any of these neighborhoods if you're brave enough, and what you'll hear is the banging, pounding sounds of the rap music, the lyrics of which are proclaiming violence against women, violence, the most vulgar lyrics unimaginable, violence against the police and against authority. It's unbelievable. But this is what's happening in America, and it is a result, in my opinion, of this thug culture that you're seeing these incidences of violence aboard Carnival cruise lines, American amusement parks, these pride parades, and even American airports. We tolerate this, and we should not. So what is my advice to you? If you really want to go on a cruise, that's fine, but I would recommend that you save a few more nickels and go on a far more upscale cruise line. I like the cruise lines where you have to dress up at night into at least semi-formal attire, maybe even a tuxedo, a higher class of clientele perhaps. We used to have those aboard cruise ships. On the last Carnival cruise I took, people were going into a restaurant with t-shirts and khaki shorts and flip-flops. So I'd be looking for a more upscale experience where I going for a cruise, maybe Holland America or some other cruise line. It may cost you more money, but in the end, you're probably not going to be subjected to behaviors like this aboard the ghetto of the seas. And I'm not a racist for calling it like it is. Thank you for joining me today. Please give me your comments below. I would really love to hear what you have to say about this. If you'd be so kind to like this video, the old thumbs up down below, that would be fantastic. If you are interested in obtaining the greatest high quality health and nutritional products at the lowest wholesale prices, I invite you to check out Live Good. JoinTTT.com. That's my website for Live Good. JoinTTT.com. Check it out. Do yourself a favor and avail yourself of that opportunity. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I really appreciate it. This is Trailer Trash Tim. I think I'll go put on a suit and tie and go sit on my deck and enjoy the afternoon. See you soon.